Okay. So, very good evening to all of you. Myself, CS Saurabh Khanna from Amritsar, welcomes you all to today's session on forensic accounting and investigation standards. I would like to thank our chairman, Shri Charanjot Singh Nandaji, for giving me this opportunity to act as a moderator for today's session. Since Nandaji is occupied somewhere, he'll be joining later in this part of this session. I would like now to introduce to you. So today's our dynamic speaker, Mr. Himanshu Sarpal. Himanshu ji, namaste. Welcome to the session. So a little introduction about Himanshu ji. So Himanshu ji is a manager in one of the leading Big Four CA firm and has over 6 years of post-qualification experience across practice areas of forensic services. He specializes in anti-bribery and corruption investigation and due diligence, compliances trainings, forensic investigation, third-party dealer audits, and fraud risk management, assessment reviews related assignments. He has extensive, vast experience in select areas in large investigation engagements, including some of them that have been extensively covered in the press. So, Himanshu ji, welcome to this session, and we would like now to hear from you from this session to share your vast knowledge about your topic and the experience. Over to Himanshu Sarpal. Himanshu ji, I think your voice is not audible. Can you please cross-check?
Am I audible?
Yeah, now it's audible.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better. It's better, sir.
So thank you so much, Saurabh, for the lovely introduction, and thank you to entire team of DAB for inviting me to speak on a very relevant topic for today. And as Saurabh mentioned, I have experience in forensic accounting and investigations, and been now doing this work for more than 7 years. And I have seen this practice evolving over the years as well. Now, one of the very important aspect which has been introduced by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and that is the drafting of forensic accounting and investigation standards. So our institute is the first accounting body in the world who has drafted these forensic accounting and investigation standards, and a very welcome step, because by drafting these comprehensive set of forensic accounting and investigation standards, which on one side gives guidance to all the chartered accountants, to all the professionals, that what are the principles to follow while conducting the forensic audit engagements or forensic investigations. Secondly, it also gives a common ground as well, so that if somebody is doing a peer review or a counterparty or a third party, and our report, our findings have been looked as in evidence, then it is very important then that we should have some sort of specific set of standards as well, like we have in auditing, statutory auditing, or in internal auditing. So that's why there is a need to draft these forensic standard is required nowadays. One of the most important aspect is also that post-pandemic, post-COVID-19, lot of industries are already under stress, and due to this pressure, due to this disruptive supply chain or limited resources, board of directors or KMPs of these companies are trying every possible mechanism to achieve their business targets and sales targets. So that is why it is the responsibility of a certified professional as well to at least independently review the books of accounts from a compliance sensitive standpoint as well. So that is why it is the requirement of today's modernized world that we should have some sort of professional forensic accounting and investigation standards are in place. So that's why our institute is the first accounting body who has drafted these forensic accounting and investigation standards. Let me just present my presentation to you. So this particular slide here talks about that what all we are going to cover today. So first of all, we are going to discuss that why there is a need for forensic accounting and investigation standards in today's time. Second, we are going to discuss that what are some of the highlights of these forensic accounting and investigation standards, the key features of these forensic accounting and investigation standards, what are the benefits of these forensic accounting and investigation standards, and I'm also going to discuss and we'll talk about on some key standards along with their provisions and clauses as well. So this is going to be the agenda for next 1.5 hours, which we are going to discuss. There is just a point of caution, and just one thing, bear in mind that the 3 hours session is divided in between two speakers. In the first part, I'll talk about on the basic concepts of forensic audit and forensic accounting, and then I'll try to cover series 100 and series 200 as well. Then the second set of session will be taken by my dear friend Puneet Garewal as well, who will talk about on series 300 to series 600 standards. And what we both will do, so we will give you the first glimpse of the standards, and if you want to become an expert in this field, you need to go through these standards in more detail. So that's the point of caution I just wanted to give you in the beginning of the session. Now this particular slide here talks about the definition of fraud, that is section 447 of Companies Act 2013. Now, one of the point, and that's why this session is appropriately worded as well. So the agenda is that we need to give an overview of forensic accounting and investigation standards. Now, just to set the preamble, section 445 here talks about the definition of fraud. So basically, as per section 447, fraud in relation to affairs of a company or any body corporate includes: number one, any act, omission, concealment of any fact, or abuse of position. Number two, it is committed by any person or any other manner. Number three, with intent to deceive, to gain undue advantage from. Number four, the interest of the company or its shareholder or its creditor or any other person, whether or not there is any wrongful gain or wrongful loss. So section 447 clearly talks about on three parameters. Number one, there should be an act, omission, or concealment of any fact. Number one. Number two, there should be an intent to deceive, to gain undue advantage from, or to injure. Number three, whether or not there is any wrongful gain or wrongful loss, that is immaterial to discuss. So if there is an intent to deceive, to gain undue advantage is there, then the fraud has taken place as per section 447. Even prior to Companies Act 2013, fraud has already been defined under IPC as well. So wrongful gain means the gain by unlawful means of property to which the person gaining is not legally entitled. Wrongful loss means the loss by unlawful means of property to which the person losing is legally entitled. So as per section 447, what are the key takeaways from this slide is that there should be an act, omission, or concealment of any fact. Number two, there should be an intent to deceive, to gain undue advantage from, or to injure. Number three, whether there is any wrongful loss or wrongful gain, that is immaterial to discuss. If the intent is there, then section 447 has to be crystallized in that particular case. Now, this particular slide here talks about the meaning of forensic audit and its objectives. So, a forensic audit is basically an examination and evaluation of individuals or a company's financial position for use as an evidence in the court of law. Now, it is also used to examine an individual's or company's financial position for use as an evidence. It also helps detect diversion of funds, willful defaults, and window dressing of financial statements. Even through forensic audit, it is also conducted sometime on behalf of banks and financial institutions. Sometimes resolution professional also appoints forensic auditors as well, as per the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2013. Then sometimes we also work with regulatory authorities as well, like SEBI, CBI, SFIO, ED. So these are some of the examples that with whom generally a forensic auditor works with. A forensic audit basically can be conducted in order to prosecute a party for fraud or an embezzlement or other financial claims as well. So on the extreme left hand side, we have the meaning of forensic audit. Now, right hand side here talks about the basically the objectives of forensic audit. Now, one of the point which has been mentioned on this slide is, by doing the forensic audit, you can create a positive work environment. By performing the forensic audit, specifically in case of a listed companies, it restores the downgraded public confidence. You will definitely see the lot of news in media articles as well, that nowadays board of directors and KMPs of multinational companies are appointing third party independent forensic auditors to work and independently review the books of accounts from a compliance or from a forensic standpoint as well. So this is basically this is basically the part of one of their corporate governance or corporate stakeholders policy as well. Now, one of the point which has been mentioned on the objective part is, by performing the forensic audit, you can avoid the instances of frauds, thefts, embezzlements, conflict of interest cases, corruption cases, bribery cases. So this is how, by using the technique of forensic audit, you can basically restore the downgraded public confidence, specifically in case of listed entities. You can avoid fraudulent or theft related instances in company or in an organization. You can also create a positive work environment as well, and you can also formulate and establish a comprehensive corporate governance policy as well. So basically, through a forensic auditor, and its main objective is to ensure the integrity and transparency of financial statements by actively investigating the fraud, identifying areas of risk and associated fraud symptoms, and a good fraud prevention program can help to create a positive work environment within the organization where employees do not indulge themselves to abuse their responsibilities. So that is why it is very important to understand the basic meaning of forensic audit, as well as what exactly the forensic accounting and investigation standards talks about. Now, going to the next slide, this particular slide here talks about the basic difference between forensic audit as well as statutory audit. Now, the objective of forensic audit and a statutory audit is totally different. In case of a statutory audit, it is the responsibility of an auditor to express opinion as to whether the financial statements are true and fair. But in case of a forensic audit, it is the responsibility of the professional or a chartered accountant to determine the correctness of the accounts, or whether any fraud has actually been taken place or not, as per the allegation mentioned. Now, the techniques are also quite different while performing the forensic audit vis-a-vis statutory audit. In case of statutory audit, we generally use substantive and compliance related procedures, while in case of forensic audit, we not only use the substantive and compliance related procedures, we also sometimes analyze the past trends of the financial assertions. We also perform in-depth checking of detailed transactions which are part of allegations as a work procedure. So that is why there is a huge difference between the techniques which are going to be part of in case of a forensic audit mandate or in case of a statutory audit mandate as well. Now, third point here talks about period as well. Now, normally all the transactions for the particular accounting period are considered in case of a statutory audit. So a financial year is generally considered as a review period or a period in case of a statutory audit. Now, in case of a forensic audit, there is no such limitation with respect to the review period as well. So while conducting forensic audit and accounts may be examined since the inception of any process or since the inception of any transaction. So there is no particular review period defined in the forensic accounting and investigation standards as well with respect to forensic accounting. Fourth is management representation. That is, auditors relies on the management certificate, representation of management. So there is a standard on auditing which talks about management representation, that is SA 580, which talks about on written representation and management representation letter. But in case of a forensic audit, on which we rely is are the evidences or is the evidence in case those evidences basically are created through a third party only. So we generally not rely on the evidences which are created, which are formed within the organization. Fifth is off balance sheet items like contracts, etc. So off balance sheet items are used to vouch the arithmetic accuracy and compliance with procedures, because the objective in case of a statutory audit is to provide an opinion that is basically the true and fair view on the financial statements. While in case of a forensic audit, it is the responsibility of a forensic auditor as well to achieve the objective which the forensic auditor and the client has agreed. And it is also the responsibility of a forensic auditor to determine the correctness of the accounts or whether any fraud that has actually been taken place or not within the organization. Adverse findings. So we have SA 700, where a statutory auditor generally provides the clean or a unmodified opinion. Then we have SA 705, which talks about adverse opinion on, or which talks about on disclaimer of opinion. But in case of a forensic audit, we do not have to provide an opinion. Rather, it is the basically the duty of forensic auditor aims at legal determination of fraud and also naming persons behind such fraud. So that's the beauty of forensic audit mandates, or that's even the duty of a forensic auditor as well, to at least unearth the modus operandi which has been used by fraudster in conducting the fraud and also naming the person behind such fraud. So what are key takeaways from this slide is basically the difference between the approaches and methodologies of statutory audit mandates or forensic audit mandates are totally different. Techniques are different, review period is different, and the management representation of findings, like in case of statutory audit, we generally provides negative opinions or qualified opinions, but there is no need to provide any type of opinions, at least in case of a forensic audit mandate. Now, this particular slide here talks about the definition of fraud. Am I audible now? Okay. So now this particular slide here talks about the different types of fraud. So when it comes to basic conventional fraud, there is typically an asset misappropriation. It can be cash theft, misappropriation of cash, stealing of physical cash, then fraudulent disbursement, raising fake invoices, company funds being used to make fraudulent payments. So these are some of the common examples. Even billing schemes where payments are made to a fictitious supplier or a ghost employee, and payroll schemes where payments are made to fictitious employees, often known as ghost employees in these type of fraudulent or asset misappropriation examples. Now, second is and the most second most prevalent one is basically corruption. So corruption even also can be divided into three parts. First, in the first part, we'll talk about on conflict of interest. In the second part, we'll talk about on bribery, and third is extortion. Now let's so even in a conflict of interest scenario, the fraudster uses his or her influence to achieve a personal gain, which is basically detrimental to the interest of the company. Sometimes what we have seen that the fraudster may not get benefit financially, but rather receives an undisclosed personal benefit as well as a result of situation. So for example, a manager may approve the expense reimbursements of an employee who is also a personal friend of that particular employee. Now, in this case, if the manager violates the policy by approving the expense reimbursement of that particular employee who is a dear friend of that manager, now in this case, although manager is not getting benefit directly, but the element of corruption or element of conflict is involved in this case. So that's why corruption and asset misappropriation are the most common type of frauds which generally take place in the organizations. Third, and which basically have a huge impact on that is financial statement fraud. Now, this financial statement fraud is also known as fraudulent financial reporting. Basically, in financial statement fraud, fraudsters can deliberate falsified the accounting records or falsified or omit some of the transactions, either revenue or expense, non-disclosure of relevant details from the financial statement standpoint, wrong balances disclosed in the financial statement. So these are some of the typical examples of a financial statement fraud. However, it is important to note that the impact of financial statement frauds are generally more than the asset misappropriation and corruption related frauds. And if you see the recent trends with respect to forensic engagement, you guys must have noticed that there is significantly increase in the number of fraud instances as well in the corporate world. So that's why it is very important for Institute of Chartered Accountants as well to draft and implement these forensic accounting and investigation standards. So that's basically our institute is the first one who have drafted these forensic accounting and investigation standards. Now, this particular slide here talks about that why the forensic accounting and investigation standards are needed. So we have noted multiple instances from our past experience that the expectations between different stakeholders sometimes mismatched in the forensic audit reports or in the forensic audit mandates. And by drafting these forensic accounting and investigation standards, this will definitely going to resolve this problem of expectation mismatch between different stakeholders. Sometimes what we have seen, the rationale, so basically why the forensic accounting and investigation standards or drafting of these FAIS are required. So it provides the rationale to the professional as well to have the common ground, because now post mandatory issuance of these forensic accounting and implementation of these forensic accounting and investigation standards, all the professionals will have to work under the consistent approach as well. So we need to somehow define our approach methodology and our approach to conduct any forensic accounting or investigation or litigation type of mandate as per a standard approach which basically standard talks about. So that is why the right now there are a lot of inconsistent approaches, inconsistent methodologies while conducting the forensic audit by different firms. But when these forensic accounting and investigation standards have been implemented by CA Institute, then in that case this problem is also going to be resolved. Right now, we do not have any guiding principle covering the entire life cycle of forensic audit, forensic accounting and investigation mandates, like we have in statutory audit and internal audit. So in case of statutory audit, we have standards on auditing. In case of internal audits, we have standards on internal auditing as well. So this will definitely going to provide a consistent approach while conducting the mandates. The absence of guidance is also going to be resolved. And number three, the expectation mismatch, which we have noted in our past experience, is also going to be resolved. Even if you look at the recent trends with respect to fraudulent instances, you guys must have noticed that there is significant increase in the number of frauds taking place in the corporate world as well. So there is a need to draft these forensic accounting and investigation standards is required. So mandatory forensic audits by regulatory bodies, that is RBI, for all NP accounts with aggregate exposure of INR 50 crore and above. So that's basically a circular which has been issued by RBI with respect to forensic engagements. Second point talks about on expectation mismatch. Third point here talks about on inconsistent approach. And fourth point here talks about absence of guidance. Now, this particular slide here talks about the overview of forensic accounting and investigation standard project. So the council, so basically the Council of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India constituted the Digital Accounting and Insurance Board as a non-standing board of the ICI. Now it is the duty of DAB somehow to get the required approvals from regulatory from competent authorities, and the formal launch of these forensic accounting and investigation standard took place in September 2020. A detailed plan was somehow created by the official members of DAB, and accordingly these forensic accounting and investigation standards have been prepared by the institute.
Himanshuji, sorry to interrupt you in between. I would just like to apologize for interrupting for 2 minutes. I would like just want to give an introduction, a person who needs no introduction, our worthy chairman, DAP committee, Charanjit Singh Nanda ji. Sir, namaskar. Welcome, sir. We were waiting for you all.
So very good evening.
Very good evening. कैसे हैं हिमांशु जी?
Good.
बहुत अच्छा सर, आप कैसे हैं?
Very good. My best wishes to all ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I'm traveling to Ludhiana tomorrow. There is a convocation.
Okay, sir.
And there was some network issue. The moment it got connected, I thought I should speak to you. Just in a minute, I would like to tell you the importance which the forensic standards have assumed. You'll be happy to know that your institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, under the aegis of DAB, is the first in the world to promulgate 23 forensic investigative accounting standards. And more importantly, these forensic standards would put at the right parlance your thought process, how you could effectively service your clients. You'll be happy to know that this 1st July 2023, these forensic standards becomes mandatory, and therefore a marathon exercise is being held. Day-to-day meetings. We had meetings stationed at Mumbai last week. We had Hyderabad. So we're very keen that before 30th June, we are able to propose in this note to the public at large. I would like to that on first and most on forensic investigative accounting standards. Field would be leading the world not only by your literature but by your action, by your reports. The only issue in forensics assignments is that people undertake forensic assignments, but somehow at the later stage, at times it falls flat at the prosecution level. In the accounting, in the forensic accounting standards, we have tried to put across each and every aspect related to forensic so that you can effectively use that thought process to create value and worth. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot. I'm sorry for interrupting Himanshu Sarpal during his discourse, but still, it is always a pleasure to connect with you all. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Saurabhji. Thanks for acknowledging me.
Thanks a
I'll
lot.
withdraw now.
Thanks a lot, sir, for the words of the wisdom you share with us and motivate us to continue for our aspirant chartered accountants to continue in this field. Over to the Himanshu to continue our topic as we were in middle of the message. Over to Himanshu, please.
So just to reiterate again that Digital Accounting and Assurance Board of ICI is going to make these forensic accounting and investigation standards mandatory to be implemented for all forensic accounting and investigation engagements from this 1st July 2023. So that is why now is the high time to at least once go through all these forensic accounting and investigation standards. So once the required approvals are in place, the formal launch of these forensic accounting investigation standards took place in September 2020. That was basically during the COVID. A team of different experts from forensic domain joined hands to draft these forensic accounting and investigation standards under the guidance of Central Council members of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And post their meetings and different study group discussions, finally the set of FAIs were drafted by DAB of ICI. In total, right now, we have Is it visible now? Right now, in total, we have 23 standards, out of which 3 standard talks about on the overarching documents for forensic accounting and investigation standards. And it is also somehow important to understand that each standard maintains a fixed set of section format. So while drafting forensic accounting and investigation standards, CA Institute has basically maintained a fixed set of section format for each of the forensic accounting and investigation standards. Now, if you look at the structure of FAIS, one may think, and that should always keep in mind that these are the first of its kind. So our institute, as Mr. Nanda has also informed, that our institute is the first accounting body in the world who has basically drafted these forensic accounting and investigation standards. In these forensic accounting and investigation standards, we have 6 series. In the first series, we have standards on key concepts. In the second series, we have standards on engagement planning and acceptance. In the third series, we have standards on executing assignments. In the fourth series, that is basically related to specialized areas. And these are the standards on specialized areas. In 500 series, we have standards on reporting. In 600 series, we have standards on quality control. Now, I'm going to discuss 100 series as well as 200 series in this session, and from 300 to 600, Puneet will going to discuss in the second part of the session. When I talk about on 100 series, which basically deals with standards on key concepts, so FAIS 110 talks about on nature of engagement. 120 here talks about on identification of fraud risk. 130 here talks about on laws and regulations. And 140 here talks about applying hypothesis. Then we have 5 standards under 200 series as well. 210 talks about engagement objectives. 220 talks about engagement acceptance. 230 here talks about using the work of an expert. 240 here talks about engaging with agencies. And 250 here talks about communication with different stakeholders. So these are the standards which are part of 100 and 200 series. If you've seen FAIS 410, that is applying data analysis. 420 evidence discovery in digital domain. FAIS 430 talks about loans and borrowings. So these are the typical specialized area where the special care and attention is required from professionals. So this is the overall structure of forensic accounting and investigation standards. Now this particular slide here talks about key features of forensic accounting and investigation standards. So number one is that these standards are principle based. So thereby providing adequate scope for professional judgment while when applying such principles to unique circumstances and under specific circumstances are there. So these standards are principle based, number one. Number two, they addresses, so basically while conducting the forensic audits, we generally faces sometimes unique challenges while executing the forensic engagements, like how to maintain the documentation for this adverse finding, how I should accept my forensic engagement for this, what are the pre-onboarding due diligence should be performed in this case, how my observation should be concluded from a legal standpoint. So by drafting these forensic accounting and investigation standards, so definitely this problem is going to be resolved. This is mandatory for all the ICAI members as well as all FAIS engagements as well. Fourth and the last feature is that they cover many areas from concept to managing the engagement to the whole process of executing assignment, including reporting as well. So if you see the structure on the previous slide, we have standards on key concept, then we have standards on reporting as well. We have standards on quality control as well. We have standards on executing the assignment as well. So somehow the structure is from start to end, and that's why these forensic accounting and investigation standards are very important to go through once before 1st July 2023. Now, this particular slide here talks about the benefits of forensic accounting and investigation standards. Because now one of the key benefit of these forensic accounting and investigation standard is that now this problem of expectation mismatch is going to be resolved post implementation of these FAIS. Because various, as I already mentioned, that various stakeholders have their own expectation with respect to a forensic accounting and investigation engagements. So by providing the common standard by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, which needs to be followed by every professional while executing the forensic accounting and investigation engagement, this problem is definitely going to be resolved, and that's why this is one of the key benefit of FAIS standard. FAIS standard is also so basically through introduction of these standards, this will codify the best practices, because now we have some sort of common standards by governing the forensic engagement. So that's why the best practices in the domains of forensic litigation investigation is going to be applicable in our assignments as well. The professional will also able to contribute effectively to judicial proceedings as an expert as well by the introduction, and we have a specific standard for that as well. So these are some of the key benefits of forensic accounting and investigation standards. We have also, and that's I have seen in from my personal experience that sometimes counterparty asks the procedures what you have performed or how you have achieved such conclusion in your forensic report, or what are the procedures that you have performed while achieving this conclusion against me, or these procedures have not been carried out. And these are the similar claims, and the similar claims also has been made by the professionals as well. So that's why that these procedures are not part of my scope. Now this, to a large extent, this problem is definitely going to be resolved post mandatory application of these forensic accounting and investigation standards, because now we all have the common ground to say that this is as per the provisions and clauses of FAIS, and we have carried out our procedures accordingly. So accordingly, this problem of expectation mismatch or inconsistent approach is going to be resolved to a large extent post 1st July 2023. Now, let me cover the basic provisions and clauses from Series 100 and Series 200 of forensic accounting and investigation standards. Now we have four different type of forensic accounting and investigation standards in Series 100. FAIS 110 talks about understanding the nature of engagement. 120 here talks about understanding fraud risk. 130 here talks about laws and application. 140 here talks about applying the hypothesis. Now this particular slide here talks about on nature of engagement, which covers under FAIS 110. So primarily we have, so and most of the forensic accounting engagements can be classified into three broad categories. First is forensic accounting, second is investigation, and third is litigation support. Now, let me give you a little bit idea about forensic accounting. So when you are trying to gather and evaluate evidences for a specific purpose, it is called as forensic accounting, because it is not an audit, but you are somehow evaluating particular aspect or objective that whether a vendor fraud has been taken place or not. So one of the example is of forensic accounting is whether a vendor fraud has been taken place or not. So you are somehow gathering and evaluating different type of evidence for a specific purpose. Where you are investigating a matter that whether true or false type of hypothesis is required. Now that is an investigation mandate as per FAIS 110. Sometimes as a professional as well, we interchangeably use these two terms, forensic accounting and investigation mandates, but there is a minute difference between both of them. Even in case of, in case of investigation, we also identify that who all are involved in fraud, what is the quantum of loss due to fraud. So this is one of the key traits of investigation mandates as well. In the third part, we generally, and this may be because of misappropriation of any asset or an arbitration matter. So expert testimony is also required in some of the cases from professionals. And this, by drafting these forensic accounting and investigation standards, this problem is also going to be resolved in near future. Now, just to add, the approach and methodology, which is always a backbone of any type of mandate, is different in all three these different type of engagements. And because the end objective is different for these three different type of engagements. In case of forensic accounting, my end objective is different vis-a-vis in case of investigation, vis-a-vis in case of litigation support. One of the point which a professional, which a forensic auditor should always keep in mind, that while accepting while entering into a contractual relationship with their client, what are the different type of disclosures, what are the different type of laws, what are the different type of governing principles are applicable on that particular mandate. So it is the responsibility of a chartered accountant, for a professional, for a forensic auditor, to at least have basic knowledge of all these principles, all these laws and regulations, and these disclosures. Because we have SA 240, which talks about on reporting of fraud in case of statutory audit. We have similar section in case of Companies Act as well. So section 143(12) talks about of reporting of fraud as per the Companies Act, and it is the responsibility of a forensic auditor to report such instances to the government in case if the threshold limit exceeds. So that is why it is the responsibility of a professional to at least understand the basic meaning of all the laws and regulations as well. Now, on the right hand side, we have key provisions. So professional should understand the mandate that this is not an audit. If the mandate requires the need to discover and evaluate evidence for a specific purpose, then it is forensic accounting. If it is the ask of mandate to identify possible suspect and to help establish possible fraudulent intent, the concept of investigation shall apply, as we have discussed. All the stakeholders should have a clarity on the nature of engagement. That is very important from the day one. So it is the responsibility of a professional, of a chartered accountant, to understand the basic nature of engagement for which he or she has been hired by the client. Sometimes it's a combination of forensic accounting or investigation. Sometimes it's a combination of litigation support vis-a-vis investigation. And one thing should be kept in mind, that this is not an audit. These are basically the different mandates. If I compare the same with statutory audit or with internal audit. Now, this particular slide here talks about FAIS 120, that is fraud risk. On the left hand side, again, we have a sense of fraud risk, and on the right hand side, we have key provisions. Now, in each of these forensic accounting and investigation engagements, professionals should keep in mind that there is a fraud risk. When you carry out an investigation, you are thinking about what worst can happen to understand the fraud risk. So while defining the fraud risk, it is the duty of a professional to understand the areas and processes which are subject matter or which are going to be part of my forensic engagement. It is also the duty of forensic accounting and investigation professional to understand the nature and complexity of the engagement and to assign appropriate skill set for that particular mandate. It is also the responsibility of a chartered accountant or a professional that he or she should prioritize the work to identify fraud indicators and to focus on most vulnerable area to fraud. So sometimes P2P process is the most vulnerable area in an organization. Sometimes finance is going to be the most vulnerable area. So it depends on client to client, and it depends that how a forensic auditor has been defining its the fraud risk in the given mandate. Professionals shall also give due consideration to matters indicating fraud risk when reporting findings of the work completed. So we have a particular FAIS as well, which talks about on the reporting of these findings. So that Puneet is also going to be discussed in the second part of our session. Now, this particular slide here talks about the FAIS on laws and regulation, that is FAIS 130. A professional appointment can be done in accordance with some specific law or regulation or through a contractual arrangement with the client. So it is always important to understand for the professional as well that what are the laws and regulation governing the mandate. Sometimes you may be investigating a mandate which is in the domain of data, but you must aware or in those type of cases you may be crossing the privacy laws of that particular jurisdiction as well. So That's why it is careful to understand that what are the applicable laws on a particular mandate. It is the duty of the forensic auditor that the objective of the engagement that should be in line with the provisions of those laws and regulations. Any mandate agreed with the stakeholders through a contractual arrangement shall be consistent with the relevant laws and regulations. Sometimes on a complex and important matters, even the professional may seek expert advice as well. We have a specific FAIS 234 which defines the need of an expert. We have a specific FAIS for that as well. The professional shall also implement a process-driven approach to assist in identifying any significant deviations with laws and regulations. It is so just to conclude this FAIS 130, it is the responsibility, it is the most important duty of a professional to understand that what are the laws applicable on a forensic engagement. Because sometimes you may be investigating a case, but and as I already mentioned, that is in the domain of the data, but you may cross the privacy laws of the particular jurisdiction of that third of the counterparty of target. So that is why what are the laws and regulations applicable on any forensic engagement? It is the duty of the forensic auditor to understand them. And he or she may take legal advice as well if that is required as per the need of the engagement. Now, this particular slide here talks about on the concept of hypothesis. Now, this is one of the most important FAIs. So, when it comes to the concept of hypothesis, the way I look at investigation, and I have been part of more than 100 investigation cases. It's a like of puzzle in the beginning of the case. Now, suppose you have 100 of pieces which may be lying on a floor, and some of the pieces you will never find. But as a forensic accountant, we are or forensic accounting, what we are doing, we are putting as much pieces together and making an image from it. What we have seen from our past experiences that we are able to build only 50 to 60% of the image. Now, because of this, concept of hypothesis comes into the picture. Through applying the hypothesis, you will be able to build the story. Yes, that's the kind of methodology the fraudster may have used while conducting the fraud in an organization. So the hypothesis theory is sometimes also dependent upon some of the principles like principles of interview, supporting documents, and other work procedures as well. Now, understanding and applying the concept of hypothesis to help validate the possibility of a potential violations or exceptions, design the forensic accounting and investigation methodologies in accordance with considered hypothesis to ensure a methodological and reliable approach. Hypothesis generated to be flexible, evolving, and include new or alternate hypotheses to validate or reject them in order to prove or disprove a larger theory or assumption such as the modus operandi. And after concluding an investigation, the professional shall be in a position to either prove, disprove, or not prove the theory as formulated. So the concept of hypothesis is very important, and that's why we have a specific standard for that. Now, in 100 series, we have these 4 standards. First, FAIS talks about on understanding the nature. We have 3 different type of engagements. As per the FAIS 110, we have forensic accounting, investigation, and litigation support. Then we have understanding the fraud risk. It depends on assignment to assignment, company to company. Then we have laws and regulations, that what are the laws and regulations which are applicable on any forensic engagement. It is the duty of a forensic auditor to understand them. Then last is applying the concept of hypothesis while completing the investigation mandate. So that's very important to understand from a closure of report standpoint as well. So these are the 4 standards which are part of series 100. Now we have series 200, which talks about on engagement management. In the first, so FAIS 210 talks about engagement objective. FAIS 220 talks about engagement acceptance and appointment. FAIS 230 talks about using the work of an expert. FAIS 240 talks about on engaging with agencies. FAIS 250 talks about communication with stakeholders. So these are the 5 FAIS which are part of series 200. Now, series FAIS 210, which deals with engagement objectives. So it is important to understand the nature and main purpose of any engagement. Suppose if you have been appointed as a transaction review auditor under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, then the scope for this engagement must include the 4 avoidance of transaction sections as well. So just for your knowledge, section 43, which talks about on preferential transaction, section 45, which talks about on otherwise transaction, section 50, which talks about on transactions defrauding creditors, and section 50, which talks about on extortionate transaction, and section 66, which talks about on wrongful trading and a fraudulent trading. So it is the duty of the professional to understand the main purpose and objective of any forensic accounting and investigation mandate. So we have already bucketized our forensic accounting and investigation standards into 3 parts. In the first part, we discussed forensic accounting, which includes anti-money laundering, financial statement manipulations, transaction review audit under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. In investigation, we have fraud investigations, anonymous or whistleblower complaints. Then we have prevention of sexual harassment mandates, anti-bribery compliances. In litigation support, we have fake witnesses, expert witnesses, and alternate dispute resolution. Now, professionals should understand and document the main purpose of the engagement. Scope shall be defined in line with the objectives only. What will be my expected outcome? That should be in line with the objectives and the defined scope. And the objective shall not be designed to commit to any particular outcome. However, professional can draw reasonable conclusion based on the evidence discovered or gathered while evaluating the evidences. Now, this FAIS 210, so the main purpose of this entire FAIS 210 is that what exactly is the purpose and objective of my engagement that should be documented from the day one. My scope should be in line with my objectives of the engagement, and my expected outcome that should also in line with the objectives and the defined scope of my engagement. So this is what my FAIS 210 talks about. Now this FAIS 220 here talks about on forensic on engagement acceptance and appointment. So primarily to understand the nature of forensic engagements, these forensic engagement come with a degree of sensitivity and inherent risk. So one of the example is that your report may be picked up by the regulatory authorities like CBI, ED, or SFIO, and on that basis they drive their further next steps and conclude the case. So it is important to understand about the nature and complexity of my forensic accounting and investigation mandates. Professionals should undertake preliminary procedures which are aimed at getting an understanding about the nature and complexity of the engagement. Professionals should conduct a due diligence directed to gain an assessment of the inherent risk of accepting the engagement. It is the duty of the professional to identify from the day one that what all are the key stakeholders involved in this forensic accounting and investigation mandate, who all are the target individuals covered under the scope, and who all are the direct and indirect users of my engagement report. So one of the example which I just mentioned, the indirect users may be any type of regulatory authority of my report. So it is the duty of the professional, it is the duty of the chartered accountant to understand the basic meaning and the guidance note which institute has already drafted, and they are in the process of drafting, and which is going to be implemented from 1st July 2023. So that's the most important duty of a professional, to at least once go through all these FAIs before conducting any type of forensic engagement and forensic mandates post 1st July 2023. Always signed into an written engagement letter, and that should be a signed letter. In case of a government agencies, that should be a letter of memorandum or letter of appointment, and which confirms all my terms of appointment. So that's FAIS 220 talks about. Now FAIS 230 here talks about on the using work of an expert. Now, while conducting the forensic engagement, sometimes professional may appoint an expert to assist him in conducting certain work procedures, and it is the duty of the professional to evaluate the qualifications, the credentials of that particular expert, because at the end it is the responsibility of a professional only. So whatever experts professional are going to use in the forensic accounting and investigation mandates, it is the duty of the professional to evaluate the qualification and credentials of the expert. It is the duty of the professional to make a determination of using the work of an expert. Also, while designing or while approving the work of that particular expert, professionals shall participate in defining the scope and expected deliverables for the work to be conducted by the particular expert. So it is important for professional to at least evaluate the basic qualifications. So suppose in case of a computer forensic assignment, that particular expert should have a basic understanding and should have some past experience of conducting these similar type of engagements. In case of a market intelligence activity, the particular expert should have that particular experience, let's say for 10 or 5 years, 7 years, 8 years in the similar domain. So it is the responsibility of a professional to evaluate the basic qualifications and credentials of the particular expert. And if you see that these standards are more or less based on the similar set of guidelines which auditing standards were on which auditing standards were drafted by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, because we have some sort of similar series in auditing standards as well. We have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 series in audit standards on auditing as well. So we have somehow drafted these forensic accounting and investigation standards on the similar set of guidelines on which auditing standards were drafted by ICAI. Now this particular FAIS talks about on the use of the work of an expert, must evaluate the basic qualification, must evaluate the credentials, always participate in defining the scope and expected deliverables for the work to be conducted by the expert, and written report should be demanded. Whether to use an expert or not, it is only a duty of professional to make a determination. The professional to retain ultimate responsibility, which I already mentioned, for conclusion of the expert. So that is why evaluation at an early stage with respect to basic qualifications and credentials of the expert is need of an hour. So that is why professional, while onboarding any expert in case of a forensic accounting and investigation engagements, must evaluate the basic qualification. Now, FAIS 240 here talks about on engaging with agencies. We have different set of agencies with whom we may work in the forensic accounting and investigation mandates. Like we have law enforcement agencies, we have regulatory bodies, and we have adjudicating authorities as well. So some of the examples of law enforcement agencies are like CBI, ED, EOW, SFIO. Regulatory bodies, we have RBI, we have IRDA. So these are some of the examples of regulatory bodies, and we have tribunals and Honorable Supreme Court and High Court as well in case of adjudicating authorities. Now, this entire standard has particularly been divided into two parts. In the first part, when the law agencies are appointed any professional to perform or to deliver the service as a consultant, and second, agencies may ask the professional to provide certain information with respect to forensic accounting and investigation engagement for which he or she was part of. So particularly the scope of this entire FAIS 240 has been limited only to these two areas only. One, where the professional has been appointed as a consultant. Second, where the professional may be asked to provide certain information with respect to forensic accounting and investigation engagement for which he or she was part of. Now, professionals should agree on the objectives, scope, and planned procedures of the engagement with the agencies. Professionals should gain an understanding of all the applicable laws and regulations governing the respective agencies. Professionals should comply with basic principles with special emphasis on independence, objectivity, integrity, and confidentiality. Professionals should be aware of roles and responsibility in presentation of facts before the agencies, and a due professional care to be taken with respect to communication with these agencies. Now in FAIS 200, so just to sum up this entire FAIS, primarily the scope is limited only when the law agencies appointed professionals as a consultant, and professionals may be asked to provide certain information with respect to forensic accounting and engagements for which he or she was part of. So the scope is limited only to these 2 points. While engaging with regulatory agencies or these law enforcement agencies, it is the duty of the professional to enter into a written agreement. Scope should be defined, objectives should be defined, and all the procedures should be aligned in throughout the forensic engagement with the agencies. And it is also the duty of, like we have similar set of basic principles in auditing standard that which basically puts special emphasis on independence, objectivity, integrity, and confidentiality. Due professional care must be taken with respect to all the communications which a professional is having with different type of agencies. So this is all about FAIS 240. Now, just to sum up the entire discussion, that what all we have discussed in the first part of our discussion. So somehow we understand the basic meaning of forensic audits. We understand why there is a need of drafting forensic accounting and investigation standard is required. Then we discuss what exactly is the basic difference between statutory audit and forensic audits or forensic accounting mandates. Then we discuss series 100 and series 200 standards. So series 100 here talks about on 4 different FAIs, that is 110 talks about on understanding the nature of engagement, 120 talks about on understanding fraud risk, 130 here talks about on the laws and regulation, and 140 talks about on applying hypothesis. We have three different type of engagements as per FAIS 110. 110 here talks about that primarily the nature of engagement has been divided into three parts. In the first part, we have forensic accounting. Second part, we have investigations, and in third part we have litigation support. And it is the duty of the professional who must have the clarity on the nature of engagement from the day one as well. Sometimes engagement can be clubbed with forensic accounting and investigation mandates. Sometimes the engagements are clubbed into a litigation support with an investigation mandate. So it is the responsibility of a professional to have the clarity on the nature of engagement from the day one, because on that basis the professional is going to approach the entire case, approach design the approach and methodology for the entire forensic engagement. So it is always advisable to have a clarity from the day one with respect to nature of engagement. 120 here talks about on understanding of fraud risk. Preliminary fraud risk understanding with respect to high risk areas should be performed by the professional. Prioritize the entire work to help identify fraud indicators with respect to the most vulnerable area to fraud. Then it is also the duty of a professional to give due considerations to the matter indicating fraud risk when reporting findings of the work completed. 130 here talks about on laws and regulations. Professional appointment can be in accordance with some specific law or regulation, or through sometimes in a contractual arrangement as well with the clients. Now, the basic objective of this FTI is that the professional should conduct all the procedures, all the processes, all the methodologies to conclude a case with respect to the various laws and regulations. And even in complex or important matters, the professional may seek expert legal advice as well. So this is what 130. 140 talks about on the concept of hypothesis, that it is important to understand and apply concept of hypothesis to help validate the possibility of potential violations or exceptions, design the forensic accounting and investigation methodologies in accordance with considered hypotheses to ensure a methodological and reliable approach. And after concluding any investigation, it is the duty of professional that he shall be in a position to either prove or disprove or not prove the theory as formulated. Then we have FAIS 210, which talks about that what exactly is my basic purpose and objective of the engagement. Forensic accounting includes anti-money laundering, financial statements, manipulations, and transaction review audits under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. We have investigation as a subheading as well, which includes forensic investigations, whistleblower complaints, and POS-related cases. Then we have litigation support as well, which includes fact witnesses or alternate dispute resolution. So the most important point this standard talks about that it is the duty of the professional to understand and document. Documentation is the most important part of any engagement. So it is the duty of the professional to understand and document the main purpose of the engagement from the day one. The scope should be in line with the objectives only, and the expected outcome is in line with the objectives of the defined scope. So these all three typical objectives, purposes of my forensic engagement should be documented from the day one. FAIS 220 talks about engagement, acceptance, and appointment. As we already discussed, that these forensic accounting and investigation engagements come with a degree of sensitivity and inherent risk. So it is the duty of professional to undertake preliminary procedures which aimed at getting an understanding about the nature and complexity of the engagement. So that is why a specific FAIS of expert has been drafted by Institute, because sometimes the nature and complexity of the engagement is far more difficult to understand for a professional. So that's why they can obtain a legal sort of opinion for these type of particular difficult or these type of complex cases or complex forensic engagement. It is always advisable to conduct a due diligence directed to gain an assessment of the inherent risk of accepting the engagement, because at the end, your report may be picked up by a regulatory authority in future. So that is why all the documentation of scope, objective, purpose, procedures performed, and on what basis you have concluded your report should be part of your documentation throughout the forensic engagement. Identify what all are my key stakeholders in the mandate, who all are my target individuals covered under the scope, and who all are my direct management or indirect users of engagement reports. So sometimes a regulatory authority, sometimes adjudicating authorities, like in case of a transaction review audits, our reports can be used by a resolution professional in NCLT as well, because that's the primary objective of transaction review audits, that your report may be submitted to NCLT if any of your observation has been classified into any of those four sections which we have discussed. Then we have FAIS 330, which talks about on using the work of an expert. So it is professionals' duty to make a determination of using the work of an expert, because ultimately the responsibility of any conclusion of the expert is with professional only. So that is why the professional shall evaluate the qualification, the basic qualification, and the credentials of that particular expert. Professionals, while onboarding any expert in any forensic accounting and investigation mandate, professionals shall participate in defining the scope and expected deliverables for the work to be conducted by that particular expert. At last, FAIS 240 talks about on engaging with agencies. So the entire scope of this standard has been divided into two parts. In the first part, if regulatory authority has appointed any professional as a consultant, then this FAIS 240 will apply in that case, or regulatory authority may be asked to provide certain information with respect to forensic accounting and investigation engagements for which the particular professional has been part of. So the duty of professional is to agree on the objectives, scope, planned procedures of the engagement with the agencies. Number one, should comply with basic principles like integrity, confidentiality, objectivity, independence, must obtain an understanding of all the applicable laws and regulations governing the respective agency as well as forensic mandate as well, because we have a specific FAIS bill which talks about that what are the laws and regulations with respect to forensic engagement. That should also be understood from day one by the professional. Also be aware of the roles and responsibility in presentation of facts before the agencies. And at last, a professional due care must be taken with respect to all the communications with these agencies. So this is all about FAIS series 100 and 200. And thank you so much, guys, for your time. And I'll now hand it over to my dear friend Puneet Garewal, who's going to take the second set of session from series 300 to series 600. And what I'll do, I'll try to again rejoin the call by 8:40 or 8:45 to answer your queries as well. So over to you, Puneet. Thank you.
I think that was very insightful session by Himanshu. So I would like now to introduce our new next speaker for today, Mr. Puneet Garewal. So Puneetji, welcome first of all. So Puneetji is an associate director at Deloitte's Forensic Practice in India. He's a member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, MSc Forensic Accounting, and a certified fraud examiner. He has over 9 years of extensive experience in handling white-collar crimes and has worked with multiple enforcement agencies under the Government of India, such as SFIO, CBI, and income tax investigations. Puneet brings vast experience in forensic and anti-corruption compliance experience, including risk compliance and internal control reviews. He is a member of drafting team for forensic and investigation standards and guidance note on FAIRs issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He has developed anti-fraud programs for organizations and helped organizations in standardization of approach to internal investigations through investigation manuals. He has vast experience of training internal investigation teams and has also been a regular speaker at forums of ICA. So welcome, Puneet Girewal.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you for kind introduction.
Over to you for your session.
Thanks, Himanshu, for taking us through series 100 and 200. Yes.
Pleasure, sir. Pleasure.
So, Saurabh, how many participants do we have?
Actually, participant list will be told by, I think Shubham has details regarding that. I think more than 300 parties, 300 or 500 participants have joined, but the details will are with Mr. Shubham.
Great. No, thank you. I like to thank everyone for taking time out on a Friday evening to learn about forensic standards. I think this shows your commitment level. So do feel free to ask questions in between. Although, put up the questions rather. And I request Saurabh or somebody from the ICI, they can, take to those questions. The entire objective of today's session is to allow you to go back and, once you start reading these standards in a bit more detail, so these are, so that these are not alien to you and you know how to apply them from day one itself. Although they are going to be mandatory from 1st July, the endeavor is to build capability among the members to actually apply them from maybe Monday, right? So with that notion and the objective, I request you to, ask questions wherever you think more clarification is required or there is a doubt. And I'll try to make it as practical as possible. Yeah, if you see, just, taking a couple of minutes in terms of, how the regulations have evolved over time. If you go back and see the major, regulation that came specifically in US was the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was an outcome of various frauds that had happened. Likewise, if you see, we had our own share of frauds in India as well, which were, if you go back a bit period from 2010 to 15, it was more around the Ponzi schemes. From 2015 to 2020, it was an era where a lot of NPAs were detected and a lot of investigations were carried out. In post-COVID era, there's a shift from loan frauds to technology frauds. We have been coming across various loan lending apps, charging exorbitant rates. We have come across the gaming apps, quite often lately, wherein the government is banning these applications. So now the frauds have evolved and the new trend is more towards the technology. And it, kind of also put us as consumers, as users of technology in a difficult position, whether to trust a particular link or not, right? So frauds have evolved over a period. And this is a very, right moment to introduce, if you say, the forensic standards. This is just a slide to show, how forensic has evolved in India over a time period. There were days when Satyam was detected in 2008. We moved from there. There's a major act or a change, that is the Companies Act, which introduced the concept of fraud, the definition of fraud, and also made it mandatory to set up the vigilance mechanism within the companies. Then there was amendment to include disclosure of frauds when they are detected by the auditors. Then there was shift, and there was a lot of traction that SFIO gained during this period. They investigated about 300 plus companies. SEBI came out with new mechanism to reward whistleblowers. We have NFRA now, which is looking after the audit performed by the statutory auditors. There's a shift now, and also a major, in law was the IBC, wherein a lot of members earlier, the forensic was restricted to some of the larger firms. Now with IBC, a lot of people have got exposure, right? We have a lot more participation into forensic by various people, by various firms, which were primarily dominant into audit and taxation. So there is a requirement to standardize investigations and also to provide guidance to the members when actually larger pool of members are participating into forensic engagements. In 2020, like I said, there was increased technology investment associated with increased frauds, which were more technology driven. Then in 21, we had FAIS, and then from 1st July 2023, it is going to be mandatory for all the members. Now, why they are need of the hour? There have been various surveys wherein it was noticed that the frauds have increased, the M&A activity has increased, so that means people are more interested, to know what is happening in the company they're going to invest. There was expectation gap between the stakeholders and the professionals. The stakeholders' expectation evolved. They wanted forensic professionals to conclude, but the forensic professionals are not ready to conclude. Now we have a clarity from FAIS 510 reporting results where it kind of deals with this issue. Then, since there was sudden participation from the members into this space, there was an inconsistent approach. These standards would help us to standardize some of these methodologies that we deploy in a forensic engagement. Then, of course, unlike the statutory audit where there are standards as well as internal audits have standards now, it was a must that forensic engagements are also governed by some set of standards. These standards are more principle in nature, so they leave adequate scope for the professionals to apply procedures. They cover from concepts like Himanshu has taken through the key concepts, through the planning forensic standards, to executing, to specialized nature. They address some of the unique challenges. We are going to see those unique challenges, what were those and how these standards actually deal with those challenges. And now, they'll be mandatory for the members of ICI from 1st of July 23. So this is just an overview of the standards, the series, 100 series, which focus on the key concepts, nature of engagement. We identify whether forensic accounting, whether the investigation or litigation, the fraud risk, what could have gone wrong, what are the applicable laws and regulations of the underlying engagement, building the hypothesis. This is very critical. In every engagement, we build hypothesis, what could have gone wrong, and then test that hypothesis, throughout the engagement. Then 200, focusing on the planning and acceptance. There are guidelines to see there is independence of the professional before accepting the engagement. There are experts which a professional may have to use, which could be in the domain of e-discovery or data analytics, etc. So how we can use the work of an expert. There's a standard on it. There's a lot of traction from the agencies' point of view. Law enforcement agencies, regulatory agencies are such as SFIO, CBI, SEBI. They engage chartered accountant firms. So there's a lot of traction among the agencies for these for professionals like us. So we have a standard to tell us, to guide us how to deal with those engagements. Then there's communication with stakeholders, which will be throughout the engagement. The 300 series deals with the execution part. The 310, which is very important, right from the initiation and planning of the assignment. Then the focus moves to the evidence and documentation, 320. Moving on to the performing the procedures that were planned in 310. Conducting interviews. There's a review and supervision for the entire engagement and testifying before a competent authority, which revolves around more of testifying for the work that you have performed as a professional. If a competent authority calls upon you, which could be a court, which could be a law enforcement agency, if they call you to give evidence of your work, it falls under FTI 360. Then there's specialized areas, applying data analysis, which includes preparing a data analysis plan, perform the procedures using the tools available, then evidence discovery detail domain, and then if there is specific engagement on the loan and borrowings. 510 deals with the reporting results, and then 600, which is more on the quality control, which includes introduces the concept of peer review or a qualitative review within the forensic standards. So we're going to discuss these standards. The focus should be more upon understanding how these apply given in an engagement rather than on a standalone basis. We're going to understand the application part while looking at the investigation methodology. I request your attention only on not on these what is written on the screen, rather than what we are discussing. There, in a methodology, in a forensic methodology, or as we call it, there are largely 4 stages. One is the initiation and the planning part, where we understand the who is involved, who is the engaging client, and then plan the engagement. Then there's the information gathering stage, which the information could be through people, could be through documents, or digital or through e-discovery. Then we analyze the information collected and then report it, right? So let us see how the standards, the various standards that we have seen here, they fall into this methodology. At the initiation and planning stage, here we identify the parties who are involved, right? Who is engaging us? Who are the stakeholders involved? The stakeholders could be internal, could be external. The stakeholders could include the audit committee. The stakeholders could also include the regulators who are waiting for your report to come, and basis that they'll take the action. It could be a court as well. The scoping part, which is very important and is governed by 210220. Then the client's acceptance procedure that needs to be undertaken at the time of accepting the engagement, right? So there are standards that are available. Then a written documentation of through which the terms are written and can be referred to. So these are covered by FIS 210 and 220, as Himanshu had explained earlier. Now the series 300 starts from the planning stage. At this stage, we need to understand what are the issues that are involved, what are the allegations made. Then we will, basis our understanding, build the hypothesis. The hypothesis could be one or more. The hypothesis is nothing but a modus operandi that we think could have been. We test the hypothesis during the course of the engagement. Although it falls under the planning stage, you keep on testing the hypothesis. And if you need to change the hypothesis, you go back and make amendments in the hypothesis and test that hypothesis again. So it's an iterative process. All these stages, although these are shown as stages, but they're kind of interactive as well. You may have to go from one stage to another and then come back. We'll see that as well. Then the project management. Who is going to lead the project? What are the communication protocols? How often are we going to update the client about the progress of the engagement? Resource allocation. How many resources do we need? What are the different skill sets do we need? Whether we need a person with a data analytics background to be in the team, whether we need somebody who gets us the ground information within the team, whether we need more of chartered accountants or we need more of people which would also involve a person with a statistics background, right? You identify the skill set that are required, allocate accordingly on the project, depending on the requirement. Then moving on to technology development, do we need extensive data analytics? Do we need e-discovery tools? That is all decided at the planning stage. And a detailed work plan is made. This is the outcome of the planning stage, wherein we build basis the hypothesis. We build the work procedures that to be performed along with the timelines, right? And the ideal work plan would also include the milestones or the period on which you will also update the client about, right? So that's the outcome of or the product of the planning stage. Then the communication with the stakeholders, you decide how often to communicate. And this is governed by FTI 250 as well, communication with the stakeholders. Moving on to the information gathering stage. At this stage, we gather the information and it is governed by FIS 320. What is an evidence? Evidence is any information, oral, written, documentary, which helps, or electronic, which helps the professional to reach a conclusion. That is called evidence. Now, while collecting it, while bases our conclusion upon that particular information, there are two things very important. One is it should be reliable, and secondly, it should be appropriate. Now, reliability comes from the source of the evidence, how it has been obtained, whether it's complete, what is the nature or the type of the information, and whether it's appropriate. By appropriateness, we mean whether it meets the objective, whether of the information we're looking at, whether it ties back to the hypothesis, right? So reliability and appropriateness are very important. At the same time, 320 says that the evidence should be relevant and sufficient in terms of what do we mean by relevant and sufficient information is that, it should demonstrate that we performed our entire work objectively, right? We have kept all the working papers on which we based our based our conclusion. We have also tracked the source of the data. We have also ensured that the data is stored appropriately so that somebody can retrieve it tomorrow and retrieve the same information we relied upon. Now, the information, like I said, could be documentary, electronic, or human, right? Human information is through the interviews, which could be information seeking interviews or validation of facts. We'll discuss the interview part, or it could be electronic as well, for which we may need to employ the e-discovery mechanism, which is governed by 420. Now, while gathering the information electronically, we need to first understand the existing information system environment. whether the information on the laptops of the user are backed up on daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. What is the architecture in IT architecture of the client? What is the source of information from which I'll pull out this electronic information, whether I need to image the server or the laptop or the desktop of the user. What are the forensic tools and technology to be used? So ideally, the e-discovery process is run by an expert, which is outside, the domain expertise of a chartered accountant. So we may need to rely in this case on the work of an expert, and that will be governed by FIS 230. So these tools and techniques that I talk about, they should be, accepted in a court of law. They should maintain the hash value of the evidence so that when a copy is made, another copy is made of the same evidence, it arrives at the same hash value. So these are some of the checks that we employ, and that is governed and also by FIS 420. The next set of information could be third-party information, which could be residing with databases which are publicly available, for example, Google, MCA, and the likes, the high court litigation, etc. So a lot of information do reside there as well. Then the another source of information are the interviews. Right? Interviews are a very good source of getting information and also validating the facts. This is governed by FIS 340. We just quickly look at it. What does it say? It says the objective is to seek information for corroborating evidences and to record statements of the individuals. So in this standard, as per this standard, we have to make a detailed plan, interview plan. What is the objective of the interview? Who are the people who are going to be present at the interview? Who is going to be the lead interviewer? Who from the client side would be present in the interview? Who could be head HR or a head legal? Where to conduct the interview, location of the interview, which could be, and the timing as well, which are very important. The professional may choose to have an interview at a neutral location, depending on the person to be interviewed, or within the office, depending that there is nobody who can disturb the flow of the interview. Like I said, timing of the interview is also very important. Whether it's during the office hours or afterwards. Where does the interview sit, right? So these are some of the software experts that comes as we do more interviews. Then the next element would come as how to conduct interview, which would include, for example, the introduction and the background. You always start why we are here, give an introduction. What is the objective of the interview? The set of questions could be close-ended or open-ended, or a leading question. Ideally, the purpose of the interview usually is to gather information. So you want to make the interviewee speak more rather than you speaking more. So therefore, it should be, for most part of the interview, should be open-ended questions. Otherwise, the interview, if these are close-ended, have you ever done this before? The answer could be only yes or a no, right? And then there's a closure. Very important aspect is, while closing the interview, you need to always leave the opportunity of coming back again. so that if there is subsequent information that is discovered, you always leave the room that, you can always call that person again to get more information around it. Ideally, at the end of the interview, there should be a written statement, whether it's information giving or it's admission seeking. There should always be a written statement so that the person does not change the versions. In some of the cases, what happened was, in one of the cases, the person refused to sign the statement and later backtracked and sent a legal notice saying that he was coerced into saying certain facts, and there were a lot of people who were pressurizing him, etc. The only safeguard we had was we video recorded the entire interview, right? So we could use that as a defense, saying that we had offered him enough breaks in between. There was no pressurizing, tone of the questions. It was very, very, in terms of if he was given the options he was given an option to, use break wherever required. So all the video evidence actually helped. However, before audio or video recording an interview, you may have to seek permission from the interviewee, so that he is also comfortable of being recorded. So these are, some of the questions, typology, introductory question, introduce yourself, provide case background, try to build rapport with the interviewee rather than directly jumping into questions. Ask about his family, ask about, his education background. 15-20 minutes just to build rapport so that he opens up, because, it's not every day that a person gets interviewed, right? So he's also scared a bit. You need to give him that surety, build rapport with him. The questions, like I said, could be open-ended questions, close-ended questions with answer like yes, no, etc. Leading questions, you want to confirm certain facts, or negative questions. Ideally, negative questions should be avoided because they are confusing. Complex questions again should be avoided for their complexity. Then the next part is where you want to extract information specific to the subject matter. You understand the verbal, non-verbal responses, etc. And like I said, while closing, always close on a positive note. Keep the scope for further questioning, and reconfirm the facts. And wherever possible, the best practice is to close it with a written statement. Some of the do's and don'ts. The more focus should be on the don'ts. Don't be aggressive in an interview, right? We need to be very neutral while conducting these interviews. Don't ask multiple issues in the same questions. That will confuse the interviewee. Directly alleging the interview, you have done this, we have enough evidence, you have done this. You may want to avoid and put, or may use it as a last resort. Negative questions, confrontation questions, these should be absolutely avoided. Don't reveal the source of the information unless it is necessary and agreed with the client. The sources should be protected at whatever cost. Don't give bias or suggestive questions, right? And like we have already discussed, the do's: take consent before recording the interview, which could be the audio or video recorded. Close on positive note. Approach with a neutral perspective, right? Understand background on incident from the interview first and build a rapport. Coming back to the FAIS understanding. The next piece of information, which is more like a analysis part, is the data analytics, which is governed by FAIS 410. It requires us to make a data analysis plan. What is the objective of the data analytics? What is the source of the data? the data integrity, whether that's checked or not. Then what are the data tests, data analytics tests we want to run, what are the limitations, etc. All this will form part of the data analysis plan. The next is to actually execute it. What are the tools that we may require? The tools that are available, you can use the standard tool like an Excel, where the information is not very large, but for larger data analysis as well as advanced tools, there are SQL, then there is SAS, there is Python, various languages and tools that are available to manipulate or work upon the data. Besides some of the data manipulation tools, there are also data visualization tools, which are Power BI, Tableau, etc. This you can also get a lot of insights just by using these visualization tools. We did one case wherein we kind of put the entire accounting database into Power BI, ran the tests, etc., and it came out beautifully in that tool, and you can basically maneuver around the data, and it gives you a really good picture of the entire accounts. Or in that case, if the data is less, you can restrict it to various ledgers, etc. Then the data preservation part, which is to ensure that whenever somebody else retrieves the data and perform a similar test, the result should be similar to one that we have arrived at. So these are some of the I would say some of the considerations while performing data analytics, and FAIS 410 lays down these three important aspects. So once the information is gathered, then we come towards the execution part of it or reviewing part of it, which is governed by FAIS 330. The review could include financial review, around the document review, etc., and data analytics as we envisage in the DAP, data analysis plan, to identify the outliners, patterns, trends, etc. If there's a loan and borrowing transaction, we also have example, we'll go through it. It is governed by 430. Then there's a non-financial review, which includes the email review from the data that we, email review or user file review, as we say, or ESI, electronic data, or electronically stored information review, as we call it. So in the information gathering stage, we may have imaged the data using the guidance under 420, and then review the data, right? Then there is business intelligence, like, a lot of information, like I said, resides in the public domain, as well as, this information that can be obtained from the ground. The next step is to triangulate the information, triangulation of information, which is whatever information that we have, gathered till now, which could be through documents, which could be through e-discovery, which could be through interviews, which could be through public domain, which could be through site visits. You bring all that information together and then test the hypothesis that you build initially or subsequently. If the hypothesis passes, there is evidence to say that hypothesis has passed. Or the second could be where it has failed. So you may need to revisit the hypothesis, make changes into it, and then test it with the information that is available. You also at this stage weigh the contradictory evidence that we have, see its impact on the hypothesis. Change plan, and you may at this stage also, like I said, go back to hypothesis, change the hypothesis, then retest it. Or you may have to also decide to engage experts, right? And that gets covered by 230. Once the analysis and interpretation stage is over. We go to the reporting stage. Although ideally, we start preparing the report as we make some progress in the investigation or in the assignment. However, it comes at the last stage altogether. Now it says FAIS 510, which covers reporting results, says a written report is made at the conclusion of an assignment. There could be a scenario wherein a report is issued, a draft report is issued, or an interim report is issued. Whether that gets covered under 510, the answer is yes, it will still get covered under 510 and also under FAIS 250, which is communication with stakeholders. It may be also required under the engagement letter. So we may have to go back to the respective FAIS and see whether the engagement letter requires us to issue these interim or draft reports. Now, if a draft report or interim reports gets final without completing all the procedures, you may also you may issue another report, additional report, and include the aspect that you could not perform the entire procedures, right? So reports, be it interim, draft, or final report, will get covered by 510. Now the question is, what about the supplementary report? There could be scenarios wherein there could be a scenario wherein you may be required to issue a supplementary report post issuing the final report. It could be basis the additional evidence that is obtained. In that case, a supplementary report also gets covered under FAIS 510, right? And you mentioned the fact that basis the additional evidence, there is change in the observations made in the report, and appropriately capture that information or evidence, as the case may be, within the supplementary report. Now, there is no standard template for report. However, the guidance note gives us a structure wherein it says there should be a title, a list of addressees, the scope, the work performed, executive summary, observations, and at the end, conclusion. At the end, conclusion, right? So there is no format. However, if you have agreed with a particular format with the client, you may use that format for issuing your report. Let us quickly cover the reporting aspect. I just want to spend 5 minutes. It's kind of so these are the. So why do we write the report, right? So that just to give an evidence that the investigation was carried out in a procedurally fair manner. So report is the only piece that even if you are not there physically, your report should report speaks about the quality of the investigation, right? To compile all the evidences that were found during an investigation, to piece together a story emerging from various procedures, unless and until at the end of the investigation you are able to come out with a story which could be around the modus operandi, the investigation would remain incomplete, right? So there's always a story to any investigation. To provide the intended audience with necessary information to make determination of the matter and decide on the next steps. Although your report may include a para on the conclusion, but that conclusion is not a conclusion on the person. That conclusion is more around what you have put it as an observation. It could be a summation of the observations that are there in the report, right? It need not necessarily should not be against any person, saying that a person is guilty or not. to be able to defend the investigation undertaken in scope, methodology, independence, procedure, fairness, objectivity, right? So the different stakeholders we need to be conscious upon while writing the report. One is, could be the audit committee, the top management, the law enforcement, which is outside the company, but still could be a stakeholder to us, legal counsel, court of law, regulator, investors. Although the FAIS says that the report should be addressed to the primary stakeholder, however, while drafting the report, we may need to consider the users of the report, right, which could be other than the primary stakeholder himself, right? So these are some of the other stakeholders who may not be familiar with the matter and may not have knowledge about the relevant area or the domain, right? You are an expert of accounting. However, the user, the reader of the report may not be an expert of accounting. So we should refrain from using a lot of jargons in the report. And wherever possible, if we have used any term which is technical in nature, we should explain that in the report itself. What does it mean so that the person who is not from the similar background can understand the meaning of it. This is a logical flow of the report. Ideally, there should be a notice to reader. The placement, it's again, like I said, it's subjective. There's a glossary, executive summary. Although executive summary is given at the start, howsoever, the best practice is to make the exec summary at the last, once we have made the entire report. Also, we should be conscious of the bias that comes in while preparing the executive summary. We should, ensure that no fact, howsoever, it may not be important to us, but all the facts are captured in the executive summary. A fact may not be important to us right now, but it could be important to some of the users, right, which we discussed. There should be introduction and context, background, scope perform, procedure perform, limitations. Then detailed observations. What is the allegation? What is the methodology that was used? The observation, conclusion, way forward, and we should capture all the annexes and the exhibits, which are the evidences to the observation section, and they should be cross-referenced to the observation, right? Tied back to it, so that whoever wants to read it through, read the piece of evidence, he can look at the annexure or the exhibit. You may also, try to include some of the evidence within the structure that, like I said, there's no given structure of the report, right? With given format of the report, right? This table just gives a structure around it. And likewise, the requirement of FAIs. This is, something on the retos here. Yeah. Coming back to the reporting results. Now you have issued the report. Basis your report, you will be also called upon to give testimony by the competent authority. So that gets governed by FIS 360. The guidance which is there in FIS 360 is more around, giving information to the authority as a part of the testimony, and giving whatever information that we had, including, basis the evidence that we relied upon in drawing the conclusion. Then there is quality control standard, FAIS 610, which talks about quality control system. There should be policies and procedures within the firm around the quality control, right? For example, there should be a peer review mechanism wherein the entire the set of FAI engagements gets covered within 3 years, right, through a peer review system. So that is part of the 610. Then it talks about the concurrent review, which says that the review should be performed by the professional or unrelated person, which becomes a concurrent review for the entire life cycle of the project or assignment. For example, the quality controls review should include pre-assignment acceptance, then the journey of investigation, the FI engagement, and also, prior to issue of the report and post issuance of the report. So it covers the entire life cycle of a engagement. It introduces the concept of peer review that we have like for the statutory audits. Then there is the project closure part, which is closure in the sense of recoveries, as well as putting the entire documents, the evidences that we relied upon, as well as the source of the evidence in a structured manner. So this table gives a fair idea around how these FIIs are linked to the stages of investigation or FII engagement. Keep on using investigation, I mean FII engagement. Moving on, this we have already covered. So these are some of the member items. So let's look at some practical issues. So before we move on, any questions till now? Ayaz or Saurabh, anything that we have as a question? Okay, I think. All right, I do encourage you to put questions. For any of the queries that you may have. Moving on to the practical issues. So this is the engagement wherein a client who is an NBFC lender engaged us. The scope of work says appointment of the forensic auditor for one of the power projects in India whose loan account has turned NPA, and the objective was providing report with conclusions related to misappropriation, fraud, and diversion. Now, there are two questions in the scope itself. One is the use of the term forensic auditor, right? Although Himanshu would have covered it, the forensic or the FAIS or the Forensic Accounting Investigation Standards says an engagement should be called a forensic accounting or investigation or litigation support. So there is no term like forensic auditor, right? It kind of also aligns with the global understanding. In India, we tend to use forensic audit very often. However, globally, it is fairly understood, as a forensic accounting or fraud examination, etc. However, FAIS 110 clears this doubt, saying that it should be called forensic accounting. Although it's a bold move, it requires a lot of licensing with the government and some of these associations to bring a change in terms of using forensic audit. Then the outcome of the review, we reviewed the entire thing. The outcome included, identifying undisclosed related party transactions, and there was non-compliance with loan sanction letter. However, in absence of reliable evidence, it could not be determined whether it was in nature of fraud or diversion. Now, when we talk about FAIS 430, it talks about disputed loans and borrowing transactions. Now, by what do they mean by dispute is that there should be an issue which revolves around one, obtaining the loan or loan being extended through unethical means. Second, there could be an issue wherein assets which are provided as security are not owned by the entity or the person. Or, they were owned, but later on they were stripped. or they were never in existence. Then utilization of the funds, which could be diversion, saying that the amount was diverted to in a non-agreed manner for a purpose which was not agreed, or there was siphoning of the loan. Then the dispute could be around submission of the false documents at the time of obtaining the loan or subsequently. Or it could be around the timing of the payment of the principal and the interest. The FAIS covers both, if you see both borrower as well as the lender. However, it depends on the engagement letter, the objective of the engagement, that whether we need to cover the lender or not. Now, if you see the purpose comes from the sanction letter, then there's a question of, review of, whether there's a party which is related party or a connected entity, right? Related party, as we know, there's a definition under the Companies Act. However, there's a wider concept called connected entity, which the relationship may not fall within the coverage of related party definition, but however, the person or the entity is able to influence the decision of the other, right? In this case, there was absence of reliable source of evidence, right? That would mean that if you go back to 320, it is not something we could have relied upon to drive conclusion. Now, there was another challenge in the engagement. The lender wanted a clear conclusion, whether it was a fraud or not. Earlier, before the FAIS came into picture, a lot of forensic professionals were against giving conclusions. They want to remain factual, saying we only give facts in the report. However, FIS 510 clears that and says a conclusion basis the work performed should be part of the report. Then the client also wanted to share our report with the target entity to get their feedback on the observations. Now, FAIS also deals with that, saying the principle of natural justice. The other opposing party, wherever possible, should be given opportunity to defend, right? Or should be given opportunity to give comments on the observation, right? So FAIS 510 covers both these issues. Right now, they also say that you draw conclusion at the same time. There's a principle of natural justice which should be followed. So how do we address it? We, based on the sample transaction, we mentioned that we did not come across any transaction apparent to be nature of misappropriation or indicative of fraudulent transaction. Right? Transaction with related party does not mean it is a fraudulent transaction or it is a diversion, right? So if there's a basis, there's a rationale to it. The related parties can also bring economies into the picture, right? By removing the extra margins, right? So there was not enough evidence as 320 would have required to arrive at a conclusion that there was diversion, right? So we addressed it through this manner. And then, we also sought the comments of the target entity, right? So FAIS 510 was followed. So this is kind of an example how, different situation gets dealt by different FAIS and how they're also kind of linked to each other end of the day. Some of the key challenges that got addressed by FTI Standards. One was, like I mentioned, the use of the term audit. Engagements are either in nature of forensic accounting, investigation, litigation, support. But audit is a word often used during the RFP as well as the reporting stage. FAIS 110 clearly says that there is not the mandate shall not be in the nature of an audit, right? So it does not consider a term forensic audit as a term for a FAI engagement. Then there were scenarios wherein this is first scenario. Second is wherein a regulatory body or a educating authority does not accept the report of professional, saying that they are conflicted. Right. For example, a forensic firm audits the global parent of the target entity in India, and professional direct or indirect relation with the client. How FIS deals with it? It says there should be a thorough assessment before accepting the engagement itself. So 220 lays down the procedure: engagement, acceptance, and appointment. It says preliminary procedure shall be conducted by the professional prior to accepting a proposed engagement, to making an assessment of whether basic principles of forensic accounting investigation are there too. There are 10 basic principles which are laid down. So it requires adherence to those 10 principles. Such procedure includes evaluation independence, preliminary capability assessment, complexity, etc., etc. So 220 deals with the engagement acceptance. The third was around non-existence or inadequate engagement letter, wherein the terms of the professionals were not the risk to the professional was not hedged through indemnity, third-party claims, from third-party claims, etc. Right. So 220 again says there should be a written engagement letter which shall be signed. Some of the clauses which should include concerning nature of engagement, responsibility of stakeholders, professionals should at least be documented. So 220 now wants a written engagement letter. So we cannot proceed without a written engagement letter now. In case of government work, there may not be a written engagement letter, but there will be terms of appointment. The next issue was around the inadequate or improper disclosure on the use of experts report. The expert work, which was the expert could be appointed by the professional himself or by the client, and picking and choosing a particular para from the expert report, right? However, 230 clears that. It says the professionals have retained ultimate responsibility for the conclusion drawn by the expert and incorporated in the report. The report should clearly state the role of expert and reliance placed on the work executed. Right? So 230 deals with the use of an expert, work of an expert. Then there were, while doing engagements, like I said, the source of information could be interviews, could be testimonies, but could also be oral discussions, right? Which you can say are hearsay in nature. There's no written effect or there's no written statement to it. The FS T20 says that the professional discovers appropriate and reliable evidence, which can stand on its own on the basis of which the professional draws a conclusion. Right? They should also stand before a court of law. Hearsay information does not stand in the court of law, right? So 320 deals with that issue. Then there is the next challenge was around the improper documentation. The forensic professionals, as we have seen, they have been often called by the authorities to testify or give evidence to the authority or explain their work, but absence of adequate documentation always poses a challenge. Now 320 says that the professional should ensure relevant and sufficient information is maintained. It should explain the manner and evidence was discovered, reviewed, recorded, and stored. Where a documentation is in detail or some other format, it should be reproduced as a hard copy suitable in a court of law. So the 320 talks about reliable and appropriate evidence. At the same time, it talks about storage of the evidence. That there should be relevant and sufficient documentation maintained around the evidence, right? So that it can be presented tomorrow if required. So this gives you the flavor of issues that each of these FAI deals with, right? And how they overcome those issues. Then the next issue was around the ambiguous reports, where the lenders were using ambiguous, inconclusive reports to classify a borrower as fraud. Then IBA came out saying that there should be conclusive forensic reports. And like we discussed before, the professionals were not ready. Now, 510 requires them to give a conclusion. And at the same time, bring out any limitation, assumption, disclaimer that they faced during the investigation or FI engagement to be put into the report. The investigation are often asked by the clients to provide their opinion, judgment, guilt, innocence. Now, FI 510 clearly says the professional shall not express an opinion or pass any judgment on the guilt or innocence. Determination of culpability is the work of a judicial process, right? And FAI professionals should not give such an or express such an opinion. Then, like we already discussed, the principle of natural justice, right? There was absence of discussion with the target. Reports were given with one-sided view. Now, 510 says the principle of natural justice should be followed. Requires a discussion with of the observations with the subject party. In some cases, this is done by the primary stakeholders through their own internal process, right? You may be asked by the primary stakeholder to give a report. Also, the primary stakeholders then, through their own process, seek justification or give an opportunity to the target person or entity, right? So these are some of the issues that are dealt by FAIs, right? So, in a nutshell, these are some of the benefits that come out of FTI standards. The professional will also be able to contribute effectively to judicial proceedings and expert. There'll be no expectation mismatch between the stakeholders, the regulatory bodies. They will gain more confidence in the work of the FII professionals if they are done in accordance with the FAIS standards. It will also protect professionals from litigation, unwanted litigation and conflicts, right? So you have done your work as laid down as in accordance with the FAIS, and this gives you certain protection from unwarranted litigation or the conflict. And there will be overall improvement in the trust environment, right? So before we move, just to recapitulate, going by just this slide, I think we have discussed the application of the forensic standards at various stages of investigation, right at the stage of initiation to the planning, and then retrieving the information or gathering the information. There's a 320 which is applicable. Then if we discover any information electronically, there's a 420 which we need to consider. If we interview people, if we interview suspect, witness, there's a FAI 340, FAIS 340, which give us guidance around how to conduct interviews. If we have to employ data analytics techniques, 410 covers it through data analysis plan, data analysis and reporting, and then the data preservation part. Once we gather the information, we perform it accordance with the 330. Then there is triangulation of information, testing of hypothesis, change in hypothesis, change in plan, etc. So once we have done everything and hypothesis gets substantiated, we move on to the reporting part, which gets covered by 510. Like I said, the draft, interim, final report, as well as supplementary report gets covered by 510. Although it mentions that it's a written report given at the conclusion of the engagement, but all the reports are getting covered. There is no standard format. The standard gives us certain the headers which we can use. However, if there's an agreed upon format with the client, you're free to use that format. The major two parts that are introduced by 510, addressed by 510, is one is the conclusion part. that you can conclude basis the work performed to the effect of the facts only. The second is on the principle of natural justice. You can see comments from the target on your findings or observations. Once you submit, if you are being called upon by a regulatory or enforcement or court, etc., there's a standard on 360 which says testifying before a competent authority. And very importantly, the quality control standard 610 lays down that you should implement a quality control system through policies and procedures, do a fair review of the entire life cycle of the project, from initiation, before acceptance, initiation of the project, during the project, before issuance of the report, and after issuance of the report. That entire life cycle gets covered by 610, the review mechanism of it. Then there's a project closure. So these are some of the, we have covered mostly the 300, 400, 500 and 600 series FAIs. Yeah. So now we can move on to the questions if we have. I request ICI team to share the questions if there are any. Saurabh, Mizaz, you there? Yeah, Saurabh. Any questions from the people, please?
Sorry, actually, I got a DC in between. Yeah. So that was very insightful session from Mr. Puneet. So I would like to ask our participants, do you have any questions? So you can ping me or you can ping on the link. So we'll be starting off the question answers round. So question and answers, friends. I think Puneet, you have explained so much well that there are no much doubts left among the participants. So we'll be waiting for a minute or so for a question answers. Anybody, any queries regarding the topic? I think Puneet, we can go ahead to close the session for today. I think there are no so much questions among the audience. Yeah, so that was a great session by Puneet and Himanshu, and very well explained by Puneet. I hope Puneet's emails are already available at the emails shared with you. So if anybody having a specific doubt, he can write down to Puneet or Himanshu, or he can write down to DAB ICI, and we will revert back to you on with the queries, with the answers to your queries. So thanks a lot, Puneet, for your graceful presentation, and it was a very wonderful session today. Thanks a lot, and I would like, carry on, Puneet.
No, I'm saying thank you to the partner.
So I would like to thank thank to Chairman DAP Committee Charanjit Singh Nanda ji to give me this opportunity to act as a moderator of this session, wonderful session, and for my fellows chartered accountants Puneet and Himanshu to enlighten us with all the forensic accounting standards. So it was a grateful session, and thanks all, and God bless you all. Thanks a lot.